You're listening to Pondering Pennies with Dempsey and Ray.
Welcome to episode 8, 9, maybe 10.
I think it's 8.
8? Well, it depends, I guess, on when we post this as well. Welcome to the latest episode of Pondering Pennies. Got Ray and Dempsey here this week, joined by Jay Nelson, author of Conscious in a Nutshell. Jay, if you want to introduce yourself to the people.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me on first. So my name is Jay Nelson. I'm the co-author of Consciousness in a Nutshell, a Psychonautical Odyssey, which is a book trying to explain what consciousness is in a way that's interesting and compelling and doesn't make you want to put a revolver in your mouth about like 10 pages in. We wanted to write a book that was, accessible. And so it took quite a while because, we had the theory of consciousness, back like in 2017, but then wanted to make it or write it in a way that could just catch anybody's attention and, write it for the layman. So make it very, very accessible and down to earth. Because, as like some topics in the study of consciousness can be quite heady and hard to wrap your mind around and not very forgiving. So we repackaged it in a way that was through the vehicle of a story. So it's a creative nonfiction novel, but that's me.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it reading the book. I have no grand illusions of being the smartest man in the room. So it was very an easy read and to follow along. I didn't really feel like I was getting lost in word soup, if you will, at any points of the book where I was like, oh, I don't know what that word means. And it's just throwing like the whole sentence off for me.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a weird thing because it's like people like to look up words a little bit, but like you don't want to, do it every 5 sentences because then it just gets annoying.
For sure. So what exactly, if you want to touch on like your academic side of things and maybe like growing up a little bit, like were you always kind of on this path where psychedelics intrigued you, or were just kind of always around psychedelics? Like what? I'm sure you didn't just stumble into this one morning, woke up and you're like, I'm gonna write this book and take a deep dive on this.
Yeah. So it's kind of, well, growing up, I was in line to be an astronaut. That was like my thing. I wanted to go into space. And so I was going to go to the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And so I was like, everything was going towards that end. But then, right around 16, I just kept doing regional theater ever since I was in 3rd grade. And so I was doing a bunch of acting and everything. And it just got more to the point where I found out I was too much of a smartass to be in the military. And so, but I was also really good at acting. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go for acting and writing and stand up. And so that's actually what I went went to school for, studied at Florida State for. I also studied psychology there, but then moved out to Los Angeles and started doing the acting thing. And, a few years in, things are going fine. I'm producing a pilot and everything that I'd written. And so like my life seemed like pretty good on paper, but then I had a near-death experience, which is basically just a drug overdose, we'll call it that. And it was at that moment in time that I had what is called an ego death or transcendent experience or mystical type experience. So near-death experience, these are basically all the same thing. And so I had this experience that showed me like the architecture of consciousness. And I was already very, very fascinated by the subject. And then just, kind of fell out of love with acting. And then for the last 10 years, have been doing nothing else except for like trying to understand everything I could about psychology, everything I could about neuroscience, as much philosophy as I could, handle. And just, like explain what the hell happened to me. What was this experience that changed my entire life, changed my personality, rewrote the source code of who I was going to be for the rest of my life. Like that happened in 2013. And then I found out these experiences are not rare. They're actually quite common. They've been happening throughout all of time through so many thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And they're very, very similar. And so it just kind of became like, okay, well, could I explain this experience that everybody says is inexplainable? And if you could explain that experience, just supposing you could, then what you would effectively be doing is explaining the experience that's powerful enough to break addictions, lift people out of depression, stop anxious thoughts, help with OCD. Like, this experience rewrites people, and I wanted to explain and unpackage that experience for people so that they could understand why psychedelic plant medicines are being studied right now and why they might be the most important thing of this century.
I remember in your in the book, in one of the chapters you sent us, it kind of had like a sliding scale there of like consciousness, like
Oh
alert and
yeah.
oriented to the left. And I remember correctly, near death was pretty far to the right, like if not all the way, or like second to last on the right.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. So the idea is that conscious states exist on a spectrum, and on the far left you have what I'm calling CS5 or consciousness 5.0, which is just our normal baseline wakeful conscious state that you have when you wake up in the morning and you haven't had caffeine or anything like that. Like, that's just baseline consciousness. So that's on the far left of the spectrum. On the far right, in the most intense experience you could have, there's the near death experience. Right before that, there's childbirth. But right after that, there's this transcendent experience, because what happens is you seem to transcend the death of your ego. You seem to have some sort of consciousness that persists outside the body. So some sort of out of body experience. And so basically, the book tries to walk you through a bunch of different states that are available to the human organism. And if you compare enough of these states against one another, eventually you arrive at, what does baseline even mean? What are we here for? What is life? All that jazz.
So let's get into like a little bit of the backstory of psychedelics and everything that else that comes with that. So, uh, in that first article, in that first part that you sent us, it said it was studied from 1943 to 1970. So there's been a lot of research on it.
Exactly.
So let's hear like some of the backstory, how it was found, how it was created.
Okay. Well, I'd probably want to go ahead and start with, at this moment in time, we're living in a state of kind of like collective amnesia, in which the cultural zeitgeist kind of believes that psychedelic plant medicines are something sort of new, when in fact they're very, very old. Like, we've been co-evolving as a species, we've been co-evolving with psychedelics forever. So this idea, we've been using ergotized. Here, I'll back up for a second. So LSD, for example, lysergic acid diethylamide, is made from a fungus. There is a fungus that grows on rye and wheat called ergot. And so it has been discovered recently that we have been using ergotized beer and ergotized wine for over 10,000 years. So there's this researcher named Brian Muraresku. He wrote a book called The Immortality Key, in which he traced back the ritualistic use of this psychedelic plant medicine, well over 10,000 years. And it kind of blew my mind, because what he was doing was also like his idea. And this book is sold over 7 million copies, by the way. His idea is that the original Eucharist that, we would take at, like communion or something like that, was actually a spiked wine, and it was spiked with ergot. So what his idea is, lysergic acid amide, which is basically a precursor to LSD, that is what you can get from ergot or ergotized wine or ergotized beer. So you're basically getting LSD, even though it was discovered in 1943. We've been using something very similar for a really long time. And so if he's correct on this, and the evidence is pretty, pretty strong, then the original Eucharist, like the Eucharist that we use now, this watered down wine that we hand people in communion, is kind of like what would you say, a placebo. And so, like, it used to be this really intense experience, and you would find the God within yourself through drinking this. And so, what this all points to is that psychedelics are capable of giving people these mystical type experiences, or religious experiences, or experiences of nirvana. You can label it whatever you want to call it, but they're able to give you this biologically normal, biologically mediated experience of transcendence, in which the self that you think you are disappears, and there's something else left there, and you get to discover what that is.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen in quite a few different forms of media where people have related different religions, especially the three Abrahamic religions, with
Mhm.
different psychedelic experiences. Like, I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember at some point reading something about the burning bush, and Abraham might have
Mm.
been something where he like was getting a hit of like uh DMT or something like that that was causing that like hallucination where he thought he was interacting with God.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's definitely something to once you understand like what these experiences are, these mystical type experiences, you start to realize how most religions probably got their start after some influential person or persons had one of these impossible to describe experiences, came back to reality and tried to share it with others. And we can go into like what the kind of revelations are that you can have under these experiences, but am I correct? Didn't you guys say that you've never taken any sort of psychedelics? Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's almost a little hard for Ray and myself to comprehend what certain aspects in the writing are alluding to,
Mhm.
um, because we don't have that base knowledge from experience. So all we have is like secondhand accounts to go off of.
Yeah, I definitely had to look most of the stuff up
Mhm.
because I have never personally talked about LSD or even to be like I read books, but I've never read a book about like LSD or anything. So it was a little different for me.
Yeah.
It was very interesting though. But I'm gonna add one question real quick.
Yep.
So you were saying that they would use these substances on like rye bread, right?
Mhm.
And then it'd be used at church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay.
it was used in the wine or and the bread, or just one or the other.
Right.
I think
So
he's alluding to the possibility that that might have been common practice early on in certain religions, and that could
Oh,
explain some of the very deeply held beliefs and interactions with a god like figure, but like no definitive proof,
okay.
if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. So basically, I think if you there's three books that I think would change someone's mind completely on this subject. The first is called Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel, and this book basically just kind of rediscovers what the philosopher slash psychologist William James was getting into in the beginning of the 20th century. He was under the he was the first one to really start experimenting with altered states of consciousness, and basically kind of came up with the idea that all these altered states of consciousness are kind of similar and that they're just degrees of intensity. And so he was experimenting with some psychedelics and that sort of thing. Anyway, long story short, Stealing Fire is a book that just kind of like talks about the healing effects of altered states of consciousness. So, for example, flow states. Have you guys heard of flow states before? Right,
I have
Aaron.
not.
No, I don't know what that is.
Really? Oh my god. Okay. So, I know you guys want to keep things like anonymous, but like whatever your thing is, like for me, it's writing, right? So whatever your thing is, writing, snowboarding, like there is this state called a flow state, sometimes called those in the zone moments where you could be writing and you think 20 minutes has gone by, but you look at the clock and it's been 3 hours. It's been 3 hours. You haven't even got up to go to the bathroom. You haven't moved. You haven't changed the song. Like you haven't done, like you were just so locked in that like your concept of time melted away, your concept of self, like you weren't thinking about yourself, you were just totally immersed in the activity. That's a flow state. Have you ever experienced something like that? Like it happens when people are like surfing or snowboarding or
Oh, for sure.
participating. Okay.
I definitely
I'm,
have.
I enjoy the outdoors a lot, hunting and fishing, and there's definitely been a couple of times on some like stock and move hunts where I'm like moving in on something, trying to get to that next ridge, doing some glassing and stuff, and I like miss a radio check in with like other people in the party and stuff because like 3 hours have gone by and I thought it was like 40 minutes.
Right. So That's an experience of time dilation. Time has shifted in your perspective, like your perception of it has changed because time is something that's calculated within your body, but it's also calculated all over the prefrontal cortex of your brain. So if this prefrontal cortex starts to wink out of existence, which happens during a flow state, then you're not able to calculate your time very well. Nor are you able to generate this virtual machine that we call the narrative self or the ego. Um, and so there's this neuroscientist named Arne Dietrich who basically has this idea called transient hyperfrontality, or it's not really an idea, more like it's the way it is. So basically, like transient meaning temporary, hypo meaning slow, and then frontality talking about your prefrontal cortex. So your prefrontal cortex starts to slow down, and there's less blood flow, less activation in the prefrontal cortex because you're completely focused on the moment. And so when you're completely focused on the moment and the task at hand, and it's sufficiently challenging, flow states typically happen when you're very skilled in whatever you're doing, and then you're sufficiently challenged by the environment and the task at hand that you're not even able to calculate time or generate this narrative self. And so what that tells you is that, these parts of the brain, they're kind of luxuries. Like we don't always have them. We don't always need them. And people report being most happy when they're in flow.
Yeah. That's really interesting, to be honest.
Right.
So that kind of back to earlier, you were saying that you're doing the acting and everything, and you had this situation occur, and it was like such a basically a fresh restart.
Mm-hmm.
Is what it says in the book. That it clears your mind, and then when you are taking LSD, it clears your mind, the problems like go away, and like whenever it's done, basically you feel like refreshed. If it helps so much, why, and if there's so much research on it, why isn't it legal? I mean, because I don't quote me on this, but isn't it legal in like 1 or 2 states in the United States?
Currently, where I live in Denver, we passed a Prop 122. So, like psilocybin, for example, mescaline, as long as it's not peyote, is legal. So is LSD. So, we're able to not like buy these things, but you're able to gift them if you're if you live here. So you can receive the gifts. You can take it. It's kind of this weird gray area, but we're going through a psychedelic renaissance right now. And so there's going to be a lot of reform, hopefully, that's going to come to many other states, but like Washington and Portland, I believe, Oregon and Washington are both moving towards that. We are as well. And, I don't want to ever like paint the picture that LSD is like all good or something like that. Like that would be a disservice, I think, to people. Like you got to know that this is going to, it can give you an experience of transcendence. It can give you this like rewrite moment, but it's the most intense experience I've ever had. Do I want to do it again? I would want to do it again, but it's kind of like if someone was to ask you, I'll put it like this. 80 to 90% of people, this is coming from Johns Hopkins University, report this experience as being one of the 5 most important experiences of their entire life. So we're talking about You lose a sibling, you have a child, you get married, your parent dies. These are huge moments in a person's life, and they put taking LSD right up there. Taking psilocybin or high dose of psilocybin right up there. Right up there with all those 4 things I just mentioned, that's a pretty intense experience. So you got to imagine, if marriage is going to change your life forever, I would say LSD is going to change your life forever, because what it ultimately does is lets the conscious self, which I'm talking to right now, I'm talking to your conscious self, descend down into a part of your brain that is kind of like the subconscious area. And in that moment, you get to integrate with what Carl Jung would call the shadow. And so it's just all these unlikable characteristics and behavior patterns and traits and parts of yourself that you don't want to see. You don't want to notice. You don't want to acknowledge that they're there. You don't want to acknowledge that you cut people off and that you take little things from, the office or whatever. You don't want to acknowledge that these things are, that you do these things. It's like we have this idea about ourselves. So we have this ego self, right? And this ego self is akin to kind of like a low resolution thumbnail snapshot of who you really are. It isn't the complexity of who you actually are. It's just your perception of yourself. And so we all carry around this wallet sized photo of who we think we are, and other people see more of who we are. And then in this moment, you get to see the totality of who you are. And I mean, it's kind of like people compare them to dreams, like dream states. And I mean, I would compare that it's similar, but man, like it it can shake you to the core of whatever you think you are. Below that, way below that, like it was just the most intense experience I've ever had. And for some reason, I've had maybe 40 of these. I mean, like 2 really extreme ones, but maybe like 4 or 5 really extreme ones, but let's say 35 like mild ones, but they're all very, very intense and show you things. I mean, they catalyze evolution of mind and thought and emotions.
That's actually something I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
You mentioned it in one of your chapters. I know, at least for me and Ray, growing up in the Northeast, like the DARE program, was that around when you were in school? Like Dare to Say No, and it's got the little like Scruff McGruff crime dog.
Oh yeah, big time.
So, kind of from Nixon on, especially in the early 2000s, until, even though it's not really the same, but like medical marijuana and then recreational marijuana kind of started catching on from state to state. What is your thoughts on psychedelics being only allowed medically if things were starting to be loosened at the federal level and these drugs were starting to come off Scheduled 1 and 2? Because I'm not sure about 2, but 1 for sure is like should not be used recreationally and proves no medical benefit. I'm not sure the classifications for 2 or 3, but if they start to come down in classifications or just descheduled altogether, do you think these things should be available like in head shops for whatever age is defined by the medical literature is safe to use for people? Or do you think this is something that should kind of, even if it's made legal, should be in a very regimented scenario where you have a professional with you there walking you through that trip, that journey, to make sure everything's going good, that you don't have a bad experience or just possibly an adverse experience to taking some kind of substance?
I tell you, I'd like to see it kind of like how we have it, but it's just so gray. They haven't shaded in the details of what it's going to be. But I'd like it to be where the individual has the option to, grow their own mushrooms. This is a plant. We'll call it a plant. It's a fungus, but we should be able to grow our own things that we want to. I'm so glad that, we're able to grow mushrooms here. And I'm so glad we're able to grow cannabis here. And that I shouldn't even be glad. That's just the way it should be, And so that's the way I would like it to be. Now, I do agree with you. Like, these are very powerful experiences. These are very powerful compounds. And that for some people, I think the medical route is the way to go, where there is a healing center or a treatment place where they can go and, have a trip sitter and, that it's going to help them with, psychotherapy, like talk with them about these experiences. Because, when they are used in conjunction with talk therapy, then they are really powerful tools for cognitive development. But if you're just taking them recreationally, you can kind of choose to integrate or not. If you continue to take these substances, you're going to start to have bad trips because you're ignoring what your highest self knows. And ultimately, what is happening in these moments is the ego self, which is who you think you are, melts away, and you get to experience more like what the unconscious is like. And this unconscious self, 99, I'll give it this way. 95 to 99% of your cognition is unconscious. So we need to understand this part of ourselves that is driving the ship. And psychedelics are one way of doing that. And so, last thing I'll say on this is my wife and I just had a baby about 6 months ago. And at some point, I would love for him to try a psychedelic. I think it's part of the human experience. It's not going to be anytime soon, obviously, but when he's like 25 or something like that, I think it would be something he would like to do. I mean, I just can't imagine going through this life without ever walking through this door. It's like you're trapped in a room and there's this door, and people have been through this door and they go out the other side and they come back, but you never do it. Like, I can't imagine living a life where I saw this door in this room but never went through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great expression. So with like, marijuana being legalized in many states for recreational use, medical use, whatever the case may be, and what you're using it for, you start to see like, well, not start to see, but you see pills being laced with like fentanyl, marijuana being laced. Do you think shrooms would maybe follow down that path as well? Or would it be kind of just like its own thing? People don't really mess with that.
Well, it's kind of strange because these sorts of compounds, they make you nicer. And I mean that, like, they really do. So we'll talk about my first one, the one that happened in 2013. I was going on this acting route. I was going on this stand-up route. I was producing a pilot, and in the middle of producing this thing, me and my friend decided to take LSD, right? And what we thought was LSD. And so we have this experience. I'm sorry. Prompt me again. What was this? I just lost my train.
It's basically, would you ever see it being laced with like fentanyl, it like changing its intentional purpose, basically?
Yeah, I think basically like even when we see certain drugs become legal medically or recreationally, there's still, whether it's through like overtaxation or what, there still seems to be a drive where people still get these drugs through an unregulated market, through the black market, whatever, and they fall victim to not getting maybe what they bought, or it's been cut with something or laced with something, and they end up having adverse reactions or ODing or just what have you, because they're not getting what they thought they were buying.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Ray and Dempsey. Like, you don't always know what you're getting, and that is, I mean, this is one of the chapters in the book is like talking about my first experience with LSD and not being 100% sure that it was LSD or not, and that gave me a bad trip. Was the uncertainty of is this a research chemical that was melting my mind, or was this LSD, which is actually pretty safe? Like LSD, for example, you have to take thousands of doses in order to have LSD toxicity. You're going to have a really bad trip if you take anything over, I don't know, anything over 300 micrograms is very, very intense. And just so you know, that's 300 millionths of a gram. That's how potent this stuff is. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that weird situation where like I love right now, because I live in Colorado, I can go to a dispensary and there's 20 different types of bud, and they're all, they tell you exactly how much THC is in there. So I'd love for it to be a situation where you could buy it kind of like that, like, or how it is in Amsterdam, for example, where they have these head shops and you can buy these psilocybin truffles, and you know what you're getting, like you can trust them. And so I would love for it to be a little bit more like that here, but at the same time, I would also love for people to be able to create this sort of thing for themselves. So growing mushrooms isn't that complicated. And I think, the more we learn about these compounds, like the better we'll be, and as a society, because yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, sorry, go ahead, Ray.
No, you're good, Dempsey. All you.
Do you think that society as a whole would be better off than we currently sit now, and any major societal challenges we face, whether it be racism, inequality in income, mass shootings, the growing political divide where it seems like the right is always moving further right, the left is always moving further left, whether that's the majority or just an outspoken minority that makes it feel that way. Do you think if we never had this stopgap and we just had this continued usage and research and assimilation into society of psychedelics from, I think the book said, starting all the way back in like the 30s is when it was really starting to like pick up steam, maybe the 40s. Do you think we could have avoided a lot of these issues that seem so prominent in today's age?
Uh, I think we messed it up in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s. The whole counterculture movement, hippies and everything, like Timothy Leary, like all that jazz. Like we kind of messed it up as a society. We just were too naive about what these compounds could do, how important they are, how profound they are, what kind of experiences they could give you. Like, I mean, and so we messed it up and they got taken away. And so, now we're at a time where they're kind of giving us back the control a little bit. And I hope that we don't mess it up again this time. I think that we've learned a little bit and we are treating it with, a more medical lens at this point in time. And I think honestly, so I don't believe that psychedelics are like this magical panacea and that, the world would be so much better if everybody just took a little and held hands. I don't believe that, but I do believe what they can give you is an experience of who you really are. And so, how do I explain this? Okay, it's like this. So I could tell you a fact, like I wish I could see you guys right now. Okay, I could tell you a fact, like let's say you and a pygmy from West Africa. If I took both of your DNA right now and tested them, they would be 99.9% the same. So this works with any two humans on the planet. You're 99.9% genetically the same with every human on the planet. That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
So that I tell you something like that and it's intellectually like kind of cool. You're like, okay, awesome. Now imagine if you could feel that with your entire body. It isn't something like some kind of top-down abstract idea you heard on a podcast. It's something that you felt in every cell of your body. You look across, the room and you see this person, and because you're altered on this chemical, you no longer are focusing on the differences between you and this person. All you can focus on is the similarities. Now, that's the experience of a transcendent moment, like in a nutshell. It's feeling the connection between you and every living thing on this planet with all of your organism. And when you feel that connection, like before 25, let's say I was at 7-Eleven or something and somebody gave me back too much change, I'd be like, whoop, lucky day for me. But after that moment, after having an experience like that, you'd realize I'd be stealing from myself if I were to accept this, because there's no difference between me and them. Is that 0.1% a difference? I mean, no, it isn't. And so here's another thing that they do. We have all these categorical structures in our brain, right? So, we think we see reality. We think we just open our eyes and see reality, but that's not how it works. First off, you don't even see with your eyes. You see with your brain. You see with what we call the internal model. All right. So like your eyes are taking up little snapshots. They're like little tiny cameras. They're taking up little snapshots, each one a different snapshot, a 2-dimensional snapshot. And then they send it into your brain and it goes, back into the occipital cortex, where it is then stitched into a 2.5D sketch or 3-dimensional internal model that you perceive. So you think you're seeing reality, but you're seeing a slightly delayed reconstruction of reality that takes about 500 milliseconds to synthesize. So you live behind the moment. You live in the past. And so what this does, in some ways, it's like a performance enhancer for your brain because it speeds up the sensitivity of your cortical cells. So, on the outside of your brain, the cerebral cortex, the outer undulated cerebral cortex, these cortical cells, they have the highest expression of the 5-HT2A receptor site of this serotonin system. So when and this is what LSD affects, they affect this, like the highest level of our ability to abstract and think and plan. And so when that happens, everything changes. Your experience of reality changes because the way that you would normally think and perceive has been altered. And I mean, have you guys ever been out of the country?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I've been to a few places. Nothing crazy like Germany, Canada, Mexico, the Bahamas. Nothing. I feel like pretty average stuff for usual American.
Okay. Did that experience of going to Germany or, just going to Europe change you in some way that was positive, perhaps?
To be 100% honest, I
Mhm.
don't think so.
Okay.
There is the possibility to travel a lot in both our lines of work, and for the I really have been trying to get overseas for an extended period of time, and ideally, I'd want to go to Japan for a few years because I feel like Europe and America, even though there's like a language barrier, um, especially Germany, the UK, and some other high immigration areas into the US, there's a lot of overlap and not like a true culture shock value to it that I could like
Ah,
take a lot from as a person. But I feel like Japan has always just been so Japan, if that makes sense, and like
Yep.
away from outside influence that I could really get that internal reflection on something truly a different way of living. And maybe
yeah.
that's kind of like what psychedelics. I think if I get what you're getting at, offer you like a different window to look through at life.
Yeah. Yeah, like I studied abroad in London for 3.5 months, and I just remember that experience. Traveling is an altered state of consciousness. It takes you out of your normal, takes you out of your automatic, and it just opened my eyes to how much wider the world is. And I mean, you see, like you think, hmm, I guess it's like one of the things it does is like if you grow up like for me, for example, growing up in Florida, like Christianity was it's the Bible Belt down there. And so, like you're born into this culture that like, has this religious bent, we'll say. And you think that's like all there is. But then the more you start learning about other religions, you start to realize, oh, they're all kind of saying the same thing, just in a different way. Like and then so I feel like traveling is the same sort of thing where it's like you get outside your normal, you get to go to another country, and then you see people are doing slightly different things over here. And is it better or worse? Well, I mean, maybe you just pick and choose what things you want to bring back to your home. You know, rituals or just ways of doing things.
Yeah. Um, I would definitely say that it is what Dempsey said. The culture shock is. Uh, I feel like that relates a lot to the psychedelics.
Mhm.
And leading on to that, I mean, in I forgot what page it was and what you sent us, but it said basically Steve Jobs was doing LSD.
Mhm.
And then that kind of leads to like even Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay quarterback. He came out and said he was doing mushrooms.
Mhm.
Um, so it do you think people aren't really as open about using it just because of like the world these days, like, or um they just want to like avoid the stereotypes, and like why are so many people not coming out and saying they're doing it, even though like these professionals in their in like football, and this billionaire Steve Jobs says he does it, like, because I don't really feel like I hear many people doing it.
Oh, really? Well, my prediction is in the next 10 years, you're going to hear a lot. Like, I mean, it is, in here in Denver, we're about to have this world conference, a global gathering called Psychedelic Science 2023. And, Aaron Rodgers is going to be there. Actually, he's one of the like,
Really?
yeah. So, so anyway, but like, I think there are tons of people that are coming out. Like, it's just recently they started doing this Thank You Plant Medicine Day, where people will share their stories, and we're helping to flatten the whole discussion around altered states of consciousness, and the idea that these are healing tools. Yes, they can be used recreationally, but the way that they used to be used in a ritualistic setting, like that's the way that we should bring them back towards. And that's the way that, modern science, like we're trying to emulate in some ways. Like, we're not doing the entire group therapy idea, like, like at Johns Hopkins University, where they're studying psilocybin, for example. It isn't group therapy like how they do it in Mexico. Like, for example, some tribes like the Mazatec, I believe, like they'll do kind of group therapy healing sessions. And so we're not doing that exactly, but we are, there is somebody there, like sort of like a shaman, he's a doctor, and they're helping you navigate through this experience. And so, I mean, it can be very, very intense, and it would be great to have a person on the other end that's already been there, that can help you navigate this other world, we'll say.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like if I definitely were to do it,
Mhm.
I would definitely want someone that has like used before and been like, this is gonna happen, this is normal, this is not normal. But so also when it says it gives you like that fresh start, that like reset, so how long? Because I saw that in the book you wrote, it also stated that it helps cure like alcoholism, depression, anxiety.
Mhm.
Is there like statistics on the time frame that it takes to cure like those types of things, or is it kind of like bang, that one moment hits and it's fixed?
Well, Ray, it kind of depends on the person, so it's very situational. It depends on how severe is their depression. Is it kind of like mild, or is it treatment-resistant depression? What are they going through? What is the external factors of their life? So it could be like you could take a high dosage, which is what they do at Johns Hopkins University, for example. They want to give people a high dosage of psilocybin, so that way that they will have this transcendent or mystical type experience. Because what we've learned in the last 10 years is that it isn't just the compounds themselves that are helping people heal, heal old trauma, or heal just bad repetitious thought patterns, like, depression. Depression is, repetitive ruminative thinking, would be Anil Seth's line. He's a neuroscientist. So we'll just break down rumination real quick. Rumination is replaying an event over and over in your mind's eye. So people who get depressed tend to go over this, like the sad, unfortunate events of their life over and over and over. So they just think about it all the time, and they just, it's like on loop, is like, I'm worthless, the world's meaningless, nothing matters. Like, imagine that was like the soundtrack of your life. Well, that's what depression is in the most severe cases. Like, that's what they have. And what LSD or psilocybin or maybe even DMT will do is just break up the neural substrates of the ego. So the ego is underpinned by a network of the brain called the default mode network. And so when this network gets disintegrated, when it temporarily gets broken up, then the brain is able to talk to itself and figure out new pathways. So I guess it's kind of like this. Consciousness, ultimately, the way it's experienced for you and I, is about a mediation between top-down executive control and bottom-up flow of sensory signals. So it's kind of like your mind is the top-down and your body is the bottom-up. And so somehow consciousness exists in the middle of that, right? So it isn't that like we have this ego self and it always gets what it wants, like if we have this idea like, I'm going to lose weight, that doesn't always happen. Your bottom up body also has to be, in line with this, which is to say your entire psyche needs to be in line with the goal of, I want to lose weight. If you're going to lose weight, you can't just say you want to lose weight and it happens. So behavior isn't completely mediated by the top down. It's also bottom up. Right. So, and so I guess with the LSD experience or something like that, you get to melt off the top down, the executive control for a little bit. And then, somehow the brain reconnects and figures out better ways of acting in the world, honestly.
With stressing there the importance of not just the interaction of the chemical compound of the substance interacting with your brain, but the actual itself going on that trip if these drugs start to get um, descheduled.
Mhm.
We obviously live in a highly capitalized society. Do you think big pharma will come in at all and almost kind of put an end to the party and offer synthesized drugs with a similar compound where you're getting that interaction in your brain, but it's taking away that hallucinogen trip that people experience? And in a way, pharma will try and peddle that to the feds and get their version approved instead of these naturally occurring holistic options.
Oh, they're doing that right now. Yeah. That is exactly what's happening. And then also, it is the case that, they're marketing these treatment centers so they're going to be so expensive. Like the quotes I heard were like $3,500 a treatment. Can you honestly afford a $3,500 treatment? Like I just, you can grow these things with probably $100. Like, you don't need much, but like they're gonna charge you $3,500. Like, so I think, and this is what is the, I guess, the fun of it right now. In the next 10 years, we're gonna figure it out with all this legislation. Like, can we have our own autonomy with this sort of thing? And, just, or is it going to be this big pharma situation where you have to go to a healing center and the healing center is going to cost $4,000? Like, I hope that's not the case. I hope that we get a little more autonomy, and these things get descheduled, and that would be my goal.
Yeah, I think that'd definitely be an interesting play out. I feel like as social media advances to the public ever has a growing influence with a direct connection with political candidates as well, especially Gen Z with like TikTok and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the public will have a bigger sway and more representation of what the public wants, hopefully, versus voting a candidate into office. Like the not to get political and get off topic here, but it always seems so strange to me that their representatives were a constitutional republic. They're supposed to represent their constituents, but they're always voted in based on a platform. When realistically, the system works the way it should. I could vote for you and we could be polar opposites. And while you hold office, it doesn't matter, because when it comes to the assembly floor and you're voting on laws and different things, you should only be voting on based on what I want, and your personal opinion shouldn't be coming into it at all. So anyways, out digressing, I feel like social media provides that avenue for politicians to be more aware of what their constituents want and to vote accordingly, and hopefully not let their own biases kind of seep in there. But another thing I had a question for you on was,
Okay.
with these doses that people are taking, it sounds like you yourself have had it quite a few times. Are people that, like veterans coming back from war, they have PTSD and they're having these experiences and they're self-medicating or going to a treatment center, is there like a certain point in this journey where it's almost like they're cured? Like, hey, you had the flu and you're cured now, so you don't have to take Tamiflu anymore. Is it similar? Like, hey, you've done enough shrooms, your PTSD is gone, like you're good to go? Or is it like a continuation treatment plan that they're always going to be doing these things, or it differs per person, or just to a point where you're micro dosing or just completely off of it?
Okay, so I'd like to, like this. Have you ever opened up someone's laptop and then they have like 1,000 icons on their desktop?
Yes, and it just moves so slow, especially the older generation with like closing out apps on their phone.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So, I think my parents, sometimes you look at their desktop and you're like, wow, this is slowing down your computer. Why do you have like, like, this is not good. Or yeah, like, so meditation is ultimately, for me, it's like, and I hate that word meditation, by the way. It sounds so elitist to say it. So I usually say zenning out. But anyway, I like to zen out, and when I do, it's like closing browser tabs. Like you're sitting in a room, you're not trying to think about anything. You're just trying to, as every thought comes into your brain, you're trying to send it away. So it's like, oh, that's an app running in the background. I'm gonna close it. That's an app running in the background. I'm gonna close it. That's another app. Like, but what are these apps? They're these thoughts that are running on in the background of your mind, and then the second you close your eyes, that's when they start to become, more loud, right? So meditation is like realizing, okay, I've got a bunch of open tabs and I need to somehow address them. So I liken this to like someone who has PTSD or OCD or depression or anxiety or whatever. It's kind of like they have, ultimately what they have is an attention problem, right? It's a problem with staying present in the present moment. They're unable to do it. Depression, people are worried about the past. Anxiety, people are worried about the future. OCD, people are paralyzed by rituals because they're focused on the past. They're worried that if they don't, wash their hands 5 times after touching a door, that something bad's gonna happen. So these are pathological thought patterns that are repetitious and then they just keep coming up. But if they were present and their mind was sorted, which is to say their desktop was clean, or their phone wasn't having all these background apps running, then they would be much happier. And so what meditation or flow states or psychedelics will do, because they'll all do the same thing, they'll all suppress the default mode network. So they'll all suppress that neural substrates of the ego, which is that top down inner critic that's always judging and talking in your head. That is not a necessary part of your brain. And that's what meditation teaches you, that you can just sit there for 20 minutes a day and just perceive that, the brain ultimately has 2 modes, thinking and perception. So we know how to think, but can you just perceive? Because that's what the idea of meditation is. Can you just sit there for 20 minutes and not think? If you can do that, it helps you. There's not a person on the planet that can do that for 20 minutes straight. You know what I mean? It's just impossible. You're always going to want to think, but the more you get better at sending away those thoughts, being like, oh, well, peace, I'm not going to worry about this right now. And you get better at noticing the types of thoughts that keep trying to grab your attention, trying to steal the microphone of consciousness away from you. And think about this, think about this, think about this. That's what your brain's trying to do. But you can figure out this muscle, this attentional muscle is strengthened by, meditation. And a flow state or a transcendent experience will show you in a more, intense way how much attention is possible. Because when you're in a flow state, like when I'm going downhill snowboarding, my attention is maxed out. I'm stretched to the max. I'm performing at my peak. These are called peak states of performance. They're like every Olympic medal, this would be coming from Stephen Kotler, is underpinned by a flow state. That's what he has claimed. And I would be totally on board with that. These are peak states of performance. But when do they happen? They happen when we stop talking in our heads, when we're completely focused on the moment and the task at hand.
Yeah, that reminds me of a portion of your book stating too about, I'm going to butcher this,
okay.
theory of relativity, or possibly an Einstein concept about time and space, and these experiences helping you put that time between you and a possible traumatic event to help create that space without actually taking years to create that space between you and that event, and able to kind of help you work through that traumatic experience that you had. And when I was actually reading your book, I was kind of thinking about it, but listening to you just now, it also clicked. Throughout my job, I've had a couple different taskers, if you will, positions that I held. And early on in my career, for the first 7 years, I kind of saw a lot of things that I didn't think bothered me when it came to people losing their lives and just some different things. And I saw it affect my coworkers real time. And I thought I was just good But after a few years, I started like having night terrors, and like I just wake up in the middle of the night like screaming, like not reliving like the same exact events, but like um almost like looking through like a one-way mirror at like similar things unfolding and not being able to stop it, if that makes sense. You know, like the wife would wake me up and, hey, what are you doing? Like, and sometimes I'd like just straight up get out of bed and like take off running and hit a wall or something because it was like so realistic to me at the time and in the dream. But the last three years or so closing in, I've been removed from what I was doing those first 7 years. And at first I thought it was just like a lapse, like, oh, I'm having like a good few months here. This is really happening. But I've noticed that the more time since the most recent event of that occurring to me, the less those dreams are occurring and the more good nights I have. So I wonder if I was able to legally partake in these psychedelics, if instead of 3 years now of just kind of sitting quietly with myself with those thoughts and thinking about it and those dreams fading away, if I could have came to that outcome in like a month or something instead.
Yeah, the greatest theory about why we dream is that the conscious self, there's certain things that the conscious self doesn't want to acknowledge or think is, relevant. They just don't want to acknowledge it, right? And so the subconscious in the dream world is trying to tell you something that you haven't acknowledged or are refusing to acknowledge. And so, it sounds to me like, you're like, you said, quote, I didn't think it was bothering me, something like that, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like it almost, I see my coworkers, they would cry, or they had to step away, or based on certain circumstances in their life, they just couldn't deal with certain events because they hit too close to home. And I was just kind of sitting there numb to the events, thinking, am I just not emotionally intelligent enough to process what's going on? Am I just numb and uncaring to this person's traumatic worst day in their life currently going on? And I'm just like, oh, well, it's not me. So, but the more those things built up and the dreams started coming on, I was like, oh, I guess they really do bother me. But I don't know how to, it's not, it only bothers me when I'm asleep and get the different, I'm not no sleep scientist, but the different brain activity that's going on, different parts of the brain that turn on and off, and all the things that happen with dreaming and stuff versus, to me, dreaming, I don't know if there's any correlate. It's almost like you're having a hallucination while you're unconscious, and my subconscious brain is just like trying to deal with it, or just can't deal with it, the trauma, and so it's just like replaying it.
Yeah. Here's a interesting point about dreaming, and just how we see. So I'm going to read you a quote from a neuroscientist I admire a lot named David Eagleman. So this is the quote. Most of vision is an internal process happening completely within your brain, and the information dribbling in from your retinas is just a small part of what you are actually perceiving. So it's about 5% of the information of your visual stream is coming in through your retinas, and the rest is all internally generated given your expectations about the world. Okay, so basically what that means is the difference between this rich visual experience you're having right now and the one that you have in a dream is 5% retinal data. So, and this is like the whole like crux of the book here, is like talking about how much top-down control we have over our reality, how much our thoughts matter, because our thoughts can actually distort reality. And so, just take a depressed person, for example. I could be in a movie with a depressed person and they're sitting next to me. We both walk out of the theater. I had a great time. They're like, the movie sucked. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Inception was the greatest movie ever. And they're like, no, it was horrible. Well, why was it horrible for them? Because, their attitude, their behavior, their mental just like stability in that moment is not right. Something's going on in their life where they have a severe pessimism bias. And so they can't even appreciate a movie anymore because there's something that they're ignoring in their life that they don't want to talk about. Something's going on. They're mad about something. They're unable to forgive themselves or someone else about something. And because of that, they have this bent on the world, this bias, a pessimism bias. Everything's worthless. I'm worthless. Nothing matters. And I've been there. I've been there so many times. I've been depressed, like clinically, like horribly depressed, like 17, 18 times. Like I know what it feels like, man. And it's so easy to get there. I empathize big time. And it's a horrible state of consciousness to have. But
each one of those times, did you turn to psychedelics and self treatment to get you out of those depressions, or has that always kind of been a thing in your life before you even discovered psychedelics, or what was your process for dealing with that reoccurring?
well, it different every time, like I've done so much therapy in my life or some sort of self-development, whether it's self-help books or something like that. There's this thing called reevaluation counseling. I've found a lot of benefit from doing that. But ultimately what that taught me was, Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor has this great line, which is, we like to think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, but biologically speaking, we are feeling creatures that think. And so what that means is like, we like to think that that feelings are just something that like guys don't have, right? Like we like to think that like it's a girl thing to feel. And growing up in Florida, like, I was taught like girls cry, men get angry. That's your option. You can get angry, you cannot cry. You cry, you're going to get savagely ripped apart by girls and guys. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but that's happened to me plenty of times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that most in America, at least, most young men growing up, whether their fathers realize it or not, it's the masculine caregiver, king of the castle, the protector, the provider thing to do. You solve issues. You don't get upset about the issues.
Right. Yeah. Be a man. Don't be a girl. God, I hate that phrase.
Yeah,
Like,
you just got to white knuckle it. You just got to get through it.
Right. And so, but like biologically, that is wrong. It is wrong. And so, if you think that your feeling mind, it doesn't control you, like, oh my God, like thought is a second order process. You're only able to think because you feel things first. Every sensation that you have passes through the limbic system, so your emotional brain, before you even think about it, before it even reaches your outer undulated cerebral cortex where you can think about it and be like, oh, that's my thought. Like you've already felt it first. So what was its name? I've forgotten the other quote. But anyway, so it's like, what reevaluation counseling taught me was that, if feelings are a process, emotions are this process, they have to be processed. And so if you have some sort of trauma, anything that's over 6 months old that you still continuously think about, that's a traumatic event. And so it's like, why is your brain still thinking about it? Well, it's trying to tell you something and you have to understand what that is. And so generally it's something like, you didn't take enough responsibility for the situation and your brain is worried you're going to repeat the same mistake because you have an interpretation about what happened in this traumatic event. And if you're not taking responsibility for that situation, then your brain is going to be like, all right, well, I'm going to keep pestering you until you learn. Like you're going to create the same problem again. And so what reevaluation counseling helps with is like, you talk about the experience, and by talking, you are discharging emotions. So you didn't get to cry about it. You didn't get to discharge properly in the moment. And so because you didn't get to discharge and properly process your emotions in the moment, the memory didn't get filed like normal. So that's the trauma, right? It didn't get filed like normal, but you can file that memory away. It just takes some sort of therapy. So this reevaluation counseling is where you get to reevaluate these past hurts. And if you figure out whatever you were meant to figure out in that situation, then it leaves you alone. It leaves you alone, man. I got a tiny story I can tell you about this if you want.
Yeah, sure, sure. Real quick
Yeah.
though, we are at the 1 hour mark, and it's very dry where I live. I drink lots of water, so if you don't mind, if we could take a quick restroom break and then reconvene.
Yeah, go for it.
I too easy. I'm a pause.
Okay.
Back from the bathroom break, you said you had a story right before we went into that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I wanted to tell people like a little bit about like what one person might gain from an experience of transcendence. So first, I'm going to give you a mnemonic to hold on to, and the mnemonic is EIBB. So experience, interpretation, belief. I'm sorry, experience, interpretation, behavior pattern, belief. So we all have experiences, but then we make interpretations about those experiences. And then we create a behavior pattern based on those interpretations. And then we confabulate a belief about why we're acting a certain way out in the world based on our own actions. So you watch your own actions, you watch how you're acting in the world, and you think, oh God, I must be depressed. Like the behavior pattern is depression. And then you believe, you're like, oh, I must be depressed. But what is the belief that is driving that depression? You got to figure out what's the interpretation, that led to that. So I'll give you, this is the little story about me. So I make myself a little case study in this. So depression for me is something that can be triggered with just a few instances, right? So I'm 17 years old. I get wickedly cheated on by my first girlfriend, and lose two friends in this whole like cheating dealio. Two really good friends and the girl. I lose all of them in one day, in one phone call. It was a really bad experience. What I interpreted was women can't be trusted. Don't ever let anyone get close. And maintain your power at any cost, right? So that was my interpretation as a 17-year-old. It's a bad interpretation. Now, a couple years later, I have my best friend that I'd been friends with since 7th grade. He was like the closest thing to a brother of mine. He hit a tree. He was driving very fast and wrapped his car around a tree, and he died. So my best friend was taken from me. When I was 12 years old, my parents got divorced. It was heartbreaking to watch my dad leave the state. Like half of the people that brought me into this world are now gone. And I was just developing into a man. I'm like 12 years old. So I needed a father. He's gone. So there's 3 instances of my life that were not so great. And that's all it takes. 3 instances in which you're like, okay, well, fuck this. Fuck this life. Why try? Why do anything? Nothing matters. And why be nice? Why be honest? Like the world, women aren't honest. I don't have to be honest. So you take a few of these interpretations about these experiences, and then, you create a behavior pattern and a belief filter, a way you view the world. And, just a way you are in the world. And that's what I was until 25. Nothing mattered. I didn't matter. And, I was still trying to like contribute to the field of time. I was still trying to like be a quote unquote good person, but there was an asterisk around good, which is like, you're more special than everybody else and you can take what you want. And ultimately, we're just all molecules in a void. So it doesn't really matter what happens. Like you can cheat on women, you can steal, you can lie. Like this was my internal monologue that I never would share with anybody. It wasn't even like these were thoughts that I was hearing, but this was what was happening. This is the underlying architecture of who I was until I was 25. So now I'm 25, producing this pilot, decide to take some LSD with a friend. And, I think I can take 3 tabs. So I take 3 of these tabs. I've never taken them before. The girl takes 2. About an hour later, I take another one because we weren't really feeling it. She takes another one too. About 45 minutes later, because we're still not feeling it, we both split another one. So now I'm at 4.5 tabs. Okay. So
and this is the first time you've ever taken LSD or any psychedelic at all?
I'd taken psychedelics before, but I'd actually taken LSD before, but never at this dosage. You know, 4.5 tabs was just like, and then I think the first 2 dosages, honestly, I'd combine them with Molly. So the Molly had like grounded me in my body and kept things very light. So it didn't let the experience happen because it was, you know, these molecules were kind of pulling in different directions. Molly was keeping you grounded in the body and everything's happy. And LSD is just going to show you, you know, who you really are. Like eventually that's what it's going to do is melt that, that firewall you've built between the conscious self and the unconscious self and let you two merge for a second. And then when you come out the other end, you get to be a better person, hopefully. So long story short, I won't give you the long version, but you know, we were at this music venue and we believe, you know, like, and as things are starting to get weird, you know, like a couple hours after we've taken all this stuff and like, it was like, okay, I'm definitely starting to feel it now and we should get the hell out of here. So we decided to hail a cab and, you know, back to my apartment. Okay. So in the 10-minute taxi cab ride home, we forget everything. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, not everything though, right? No, everything. At a high enough dosage, this molecule, LSD, will stop you from being able to connect new information to past information. So every time you're looking out at the world, you're always seeing through your own individualized history. And so this was a moment in which, or moments, I should say, a very long stretch of time in which I had no access to my memory banks. I didn't know who I was. I didn't have a father or a mother. I didn't know what, you know, we get to my apartment complex. We can't even figure out how to pay the taxi cab driver. Okay. That's how gone we were.
It's basically like you're experiencing consciousness for the first time.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. Experiencing consciousness for the very first time. And so like, you know, try to swipe to pay this guy. The credit card machine doesn't work. He takes us to an ATM. I'm standing in front of this ATM. It's a machine embedded in a wall. And I have no idea what it is. You know, I don't know what ATMs are. I don't know what electronic banking is. I don't know what fiat currency is. And so, you know, I like turn to the cabbie, the cab driver, and I'm like, just being totally honest for a second. I'm like, dude, you got to help me because I have no idea what the hell this thing is. The guy looks in my eyes, looks in my pupils, sees how big they are, and says, "Holy shit." And then he pushes past me and he's like, "Wow, I wish I was wherever you are right now." And then helps us like figure out how to work this ATM. Like I still don't understand. It like takes this weird piece of plastic from my pocket and then somehow spits out green crisp paper that's supposed to mean something. I don't fucking know what this is. So I grab it and I just hand it to the guy and I'm like, take us home. We get back to my place, right? Now, all right. So we get back to my place. We get into my apartment. Now I'm locked out of the room. Like my room has a lock on it. And we were locked out of my room. So we're like pounding on my roommate's room to like, you know, come out and play. So Brian comes out and he's like, it's 3:30 in the morning. He's like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we're like, we're tripping so hard. We need help. We have no idea what's going on right now. So he comes out to help us, like, you know, figure things out for a minute. Eventually, he thinks we're just too gone to be harmful. So he disappears, right? And then I forget that we've taken LSD. Okay. Now it gets to a point where it's like it was coming in waves where it was like having no memory at all. Like I was completely sunk in the present moment, 100% in the present moment, not able to extract myself and think about the past or project myself in the future or imagine a time when I was not on something. I couldn't imagine what baseline was. This was my reality. I was altered. It had always been this way and it would always be this way. It was the scariest moment of my life because it's like, you know, you've melted your brain and now it's like this forever. It's going to be like this forever. Time dilation is happening so much that like it feels infinite. I'm in a moment where it's starting to feel infinite. Okay. And then I get it in my head. Oh my God, this is an LSD. This is an LSD, you know, because I have this memory of when we're back at the club and I'd first put those tabs in my mouth and I tasted this thing. And then I remember this, you know, I remember, you know, reading / hearing about this idea. If it's bitter, it's a spitter. Because if it's bitter, if it tastes like it's been dipped in battery acid, then it's not real LSD. It's this research chemical called 25I N-bomb or something similar. So people would often pawn off research chemicals as LSD because it was cheaper. And that is what I was scared was happening. It had already happened to me twice before. I had already been sold LSD as I was already sold these tabs that I thought was LSD, and it turned out to be something else. And so this is another time in which I was trying LSD and I thought it was the wrong thing. And so I know that 25I N-bomb is something you can overdose on really easily, just with a couple tabs. And I took 4.5. And so I genuinely believed with 100% of my being that I was about to die, that I was about to, have multiple organ failure, cardiac arrest, tachycardia, all that shit. Like, so I have this ego death moment, this moment where I believe I am 100% about to die. And Callie, she's starting to feel, the girl I was with, she's starting to feel a little bit crazy too. So, I'm melting down. I'm thinking about the die, like, and then she grabs this chair, right? This chair I usually sit in at breakfast, red plastic seat, steel base, and throws it through my second floor window.
Oh my gosh.
It goes
Oh my gosh.
out the window, shattered. It's fucking 4 a.m. at this point. Brian comes back out of my roommate comes back out of the room, sees the empty chair, sees we're missing a chair, sees the hole in the living room wall. I'm sorry, in the living room window, and says, quote, "What the fuck are you guys doing?" So then Callie grabs the glasses off his face, throws them against the wall, and says, "Just accept it." And then he's like, "Oh my God, I can't even believe, like, we had just become roommates like a month ago." And he's like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" So anyway, he like disappears. And I think that I got like 20 seconds left to live. Like I've never drowned, but I've almost drowned. And I can only liken this experience to just knowing that you have 20 seconds of air left. And then you're going to go, and that's it. You're going to breathe water into your lungs, and that's going to be it for you. Now that's what it feels like. I genuinely 100% believe I'm about to die. And what I realize in that moment, like I'm pacing around the room. My hands are on both sides of my head. I'm trying anything I can to like ignore the fact that I'm about to die. And I finally collapse to the ground, right? I collapse to the ground. My head hits the floor. And then I'm in a place I call the possibility space. Now in this space, you could describe it as nirvana. You could describe it as heaven. I like to use religiously neutral terms like the possibility space. So for me, it felt as if the conscious self had descended into, we'll call it the unconscious land. And down there, it felt very timeless. And I got to see things. One thing I got to see was that I'm 25 years old and I haven't had a best friend since I was 19. And why is that? Well, because when I was 19 and my best friend died, I made a promise to myself unconsciously that was it for me. I didn't need another best friend. I didn't have another best friend. I didn't want another best friend. So I kept myself closed off from having open, honest relationships with people. I kept myself from, having relationships with women that were really like honest and truthful because of what happened when I was 17. Like, these are behavior patterns that maybe other people might have realized if they really knew me, but I didn't see that. I didn't know it. I didn't know that I was pushing all friends away because I was too scared to have a human connection, because if I lost another person again, I'd be devastated. Like, I didn't realize that experience was so traumatic and that I hadn't processed it enough. If I had processed it, I would have a best friend at age 25, but I didn't. So I kept guy friends at bay. I kept girls at bay. And then it was in that moment that like, I thought that was it for me, that everything got revealed. Everything got revealed. It's like, no, you are a lying, cheating piece of shit who's taking advantage of people. And you're doing this, like you excuse it because you had these, 3 very traumatic things happen, but that doesn't make it okay. And like, if I had, and then you say, it's like, well, if I had known, I wouldn't have done that. Well, then I finally got to know. This is why you are the way you are, so what are you going to do about it? And it was the most disgusting thing, because while I was in this possibility space, I thought I was dead. I thought that was it for me, but I was pleading with my highest self to come back. I'll do anything to come back, And, it's like, all right, well, we have enough narcissistic, selfish, cheating actors out there. So what do you got? What do you got that's better than that? I had to sit there for a really long time. Like, and this is a place that feels infinite. Okay. Like, I can't even tell you the amount of years I spent in this experience. I mean, kind of like Inception or whatever, like where like each dream level compounds and time goes, more slowly. It's just like that. And you can have experiences just like that. Like, imagine, like, for Leonardo DiCaprio coming back into his body after being trapped in that limbo spot for 40 or 50 years, and then now he's back in a young body, but he had grown old with his wife. Like, that's how it felt when I came back. But when I did come back, like, I knew more about who I was, and that I wasn't going to be acting anymore. Like, that part of me died. Like, I killed myself. He walked into the light that day, never came back. But who came back? I came back.
Oh,
that's deep. So
yeah.
from that point on, did you just know like psychedelics was the thing that you were gonna throw your whole being into? Because there's just so many other people that could have benefit from a similar experience, but in a more controlled environment, maybe not as frightening, scaring them to half the death.
Oh yeah. No, actually, what happened was I came back and then I was like, well, that was a crazy experience. It felt like I talked to a god archetype. But no, that didn't happen. No, I can still act. So for the next 2.5 years, I kept getting depressed and kept getting depressed and kept getting depressed. I kept trying to, edit this pilot, edit this pilot and pitch myself as an actor, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Like, that person who had the motivation and drive to do acting and stand-up literally died, dude. I mean, like, not literally, but like died. Okay. So he's gone. And then, so who picked up the pieces? Like, it's like you got shoved back into this body and you're like, okay, well, everything in this body is already geared towards, he's already running this race. So I'm just going to run this race that he was running. So that's what I was doing for the next 2.5 years. And I, until I finally realized, no, this is why you're getting depressed, because you're ignoring what your highest self wants. Your entire psyche wants you to do something more challenging and to do something with integrity. And, oh, by the way, you don't remember, but you said you would do anything to come back. And what was that something you had to give up? Well, it was the life that you had. You had to give that up to come back. Do you not remember? And that's what I wanted to forget, that I chose a different path.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, if I could switch my life like that, I'm taking it.
Right? I mean, like, it's one of those experiences of like the most intense experience of my entire life, but I'll never forget it. I mean, it's the greatest gift to be reborn in your own body. Like, I thought I was going to die. Everything, like, it was going to die. And while my life was flashing before my eyes, it was kind of like a boomerang, in the sense that, like, it goes forward and then it goes back and then it goes forward and then it goes back and just goes, like, turns back and forth for infinity. That's what my life flashing before my eyes was like, except there wasn't the ego self slash narrative self, with layering it with commentary. It wasn't layered with, oh, but you only cheated on her because of this. And you only did this. You only took this because of this. There were no more excuses. It was just pattern after pattern after pattern of me not being a good person. And, like, I mean, how long does it take for you to realize, okay, well, I give up. I gave up. The ending of karma is called nirvana. So I finally confronted and ended all of my karma. And in that moment, I reached nirvana. The second I let go of my breath and was like, okay, this is it. I'm dead. I'm a monster and I'm accepting it. That's it. Head hit the ground. And then boom, I'm in the possibility space. And this place feels like nirvana. It feels like heaven. It feels infinite. It feels eternal. And that is a moment that will change your life forever.
The lady that was with you, did she report having any kind of similar experience? Or it sounds like after that occurred, it still kind of like took you 2 years to come to terms with everything. So even in that moment when it happened to you, it sounds like you weren't even fully aware either.
It's so strange. She had a very different experience than I did. She also didn't take as much. And she just was in a different point in her life, like um it it it's only a bad trip if you fight it, right? Like your brain is going to show you things you don't want to see. And so if you fight it, then it's a really bad trip. But if you just like surrender and accept and just like, like a witness, a passive witness, I'm just gonna, try and learn as much as I can from this experience. It's gonna be a crazy dream. That's all I know. But I'm gonna try and learn as much as I can. Like that's what you should do going into it. That's not what I did. But like, these experiences, like if people rate them as 80 to 90% of people rate it as their 5 most important experience of their entire life, you got to imagine that this experience is something that is like, sure, it was only one night, but there was so much that was unpacked and like that just was shown to me that night that I've been thinking about it for 10 years. I mean, I had an experience in 2017. I'm still writing about it. That was 6 years ago. I'm still thinking about it. Like there was so much information downloaded. Like, and here's the thing about like infinity or eternity. Like if I say that word to you, you might be like, okay, well, I want to swap in perceived eternity or perceived infinity. And that's fine, whatever you want to do. But like, you just like, I'm not using those words carelessly. People often describe it as a timeless dimension, but if it is timeless, then you're always there. Like time doesn't match onto it. But, to give a number to it, like the 2017 experience, I felt as if I was stuck in limbo for 10,000 years. It was way more intense than the 2013 experience, but I needed to grow again. And the second I got out of, not the second, but like I got out of the experience, less than 6 months later, I've written the first draft of the book. I'm engaged to my wife and I'm moving away from LA.
Are you and that old roommate still friends?
Oh man. No, we're not, sadly. He was a great guy. Sadly, we're not, and that is my fault. Yeah, man. I life is about figuring out how to manage relationships, and man, I was not good in my 20s.
I mean, I can agree with that. I even before my 20s, still not good, but I'm figuring it out.
And that's what we're here to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
man.
And I mean, back to your story. I mean, as you were saying these things that happen, I honestly like kind of related to the 2 of the 3 that you said.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Back in high school, having that girlfriend and getting cheated on.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, fuck relationships, fuck girls. I hate girls. and that was like, it wasn't, I mean, I was still young, but it was like kind of my first ever real relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, fuck this. Like, my life's ruined. I hate this. This shit sucks. And then, but I mean, I haven't taken psychedelics, so I wouldn't know how to like feel at that point. But, and then my 11th grade year, my friend was heading back from a concert and hit a railroad track and passed away that night too. So, I mean, it was a lot of trauma happening in a short period of time that kind of just, threw everything off. And, I mean, I had to deal with it in a way where I couldn't use psychedelics, but I definitely kind of relate to your story.
Only if you would have had psychedelics available. You wouldn't have made the same mistake twice with the women, even though I told you not to do it.
Oh, really?
Stop.
He has a propensity for just punching himself in the face repeatedly. And
really,
more often than not, before he punches himself in the face, he'll call me and he'll say, I'm going to punch myself in the face. And I say, you should not do that because X, Y, and Z. He's like, those are some good points. gonna sleep on it for a day or two, and I'll let you know. And then usually the same day, like allows no time to process, is just like, no, punching myself in the face is definitely the right move here. And I'm like, oh God, what is this man doing? Was I making these same mistakes when I was in my early 20s? I don't think I was, but maybe I'm just ignorant to it.
Listen, I'm learning from my mistakes, kind of, sort of.
I think the whole point of I think the whole point of having older people around in your life to ask these questions to, though, is they've already made these mistakes and they can speak on them. So you don't have to make the same mistakes. Life doesn't have to be learned the hard way, Ray. You could take some experience every once in a while.
No. You're 110% right. But sometimes it's nice to learn shit on your own. Mm-hmm. I'm more of a I want to do this on my own. I want to learn this on my own because of like self-growth, basically. Like I don't want somebody to just like me to ask anybody a question, be like, hey, this is happening. What should I do? Like I don't want to have to be like quote unquote babied through it. You know what I mean? Like I want to experience that myself and feel that myself.
I'm not feeling it. If God, Yahweh, Allah came down with a book and said, these are all the mistakes of mankind. Here you go. Have an easy life. I'd be like, you know what? You a real one. I appreciate that.
Oh, no, I'd listen to that.
Talking about your trips before we went on the rant that is Ray's life and his mistakes, countless as they may be.
Honestly, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's like a good point you brought up, like self-harm. Like you punch yourself in the face. I've done that before. I've punched many steering wheels. I've punched many walls, many doors, dude, like so many times. But why do we do it? You know, like we do it because we'd rather feel the pain, the physical pain, than this emotional pain that we're feeling in the moment. We'd rather feel literally anything else. Glass in my hand. I'd rather feel that than what I'm experiencing in my head right now. And so that's why I did it. I put my hand through a sliding glass door once, you know, like, and then I was like laughing about it because I was like, some people punch through glass and they get like a bloody hand. I didn't. And then I looked down and my hand is leaking out blood. And then one of the shards of glass went into my thigh and almost hit a huge artery. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. You'd think that'd be the last time I punch something, but it isn't. Bro, like, I want to learn things the hard way too, apparently. Like, but like, you know, I mean, it's all about regulating your nervous system, right? You know, us right now, we're regulating each other's nervous system. You know, you go hug your wife or anybody, like, you know, like we tell a story so that we can like get some resonance from them and like share emotions and share like hormones and neurotransmitters, like when we hug or whatever. Like that's all about regulating your nervous system. Or sometimes something's too intense. People, what do? They go grab 3 shots in a row, you know, take down. I'm going to feel alcohol. That's what I'm going to feel. I'm going to control my nervous system because it's out of control right now. So it's all about like, what are the good ways of controlling your nervous system? Because punching something or cutting is not a good way to do it. Like, I just know from experience, like there's better ways to do it. I mean, and you don't even necessarily have to take psychedelics. Like, you know, like regulating your nervous system can be done with, I don't know, like going for a walk or meditation or, you know, like whatever it is, like that honors yourself. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, I feel you on the punching.
Yeah. I think on the, a lot of talks I have to give at work sometime on like decision making and stuff. I feel like a lot of people forget a lot of times freedom can extend to you imposing that freedom on yourself, because that there's that split second and something occurs, and even if it seems like an automatic response, nothing is automatic. So you need to be able to have that self-regulation to this input, this thing occurred. I need to realize what occurred and I need to react to it accordingly. And I feel like a lot of those times in life, those inputs are other people, and you can't relinquish your freedom to someone else to emotionally influence you to react in a non conducive way to you, kind of taking away that freedom of you to self-regulate and make the best decision in that moment instead of making a rash decision that's going to ultimately harm you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But with those few 3 or 4, I think you said towards the beginning there, like real profound experiences that you had, were those always like just mega dosing, just loading up for whatever reason that day on a hallucinogen, or can people get the same benefit from dosing these different drugs? Is there a benefit one over the other where you just need like a powerful hallucination experience where you just need to down 5 tabs of LSD versus like a microdose before going into a therapy session with a psychiatrist?
Yeah, it's going to be different. It's kind of like looking in the mirror, right? So you can walk by a mirror and just kind of look in it and then maybe like, okay, cool, my shirt's on right and my hair's not crazy. Okay. Or you can stare in the mirror for an hour and really see and really take inventory on yourself, right? So a microdose is going to be like walking past a mirror. A macrodose is going to be like staring in the mirror for an hour. It just depends on the experience, like what are you trying to gain? And it is sorry, it isn't always the case that it is dose dependent. Like I had a very, very powerful transcendent experience with 50 micrograms. So that's a half of an LSD tab. My wife and I were on a hike, and I think it was just because of the hike and the elevation, and it just happened to be her birthday, and we just took a half a tab, and then took a puff of some cannabis, and then the next thing you know, we are literally outside of this planet, like gone. And man, that was another experience that rewrote me. And I was like, what? On 50 micrograms, I couldn't believe that it happened. So, once this experience happens to you the first time, and these experiences, by the way, these transcendent or mystical type experiences, yes, they can happen on psychedelics. Yes, psychedelics reliably generate these experiences, but they can happen randomly. They can happen if you meditate enough. Like they can happen. They just happen randomly. So people slip into these experiences. Like I'd heard about a couple that like a kamikaze pilot, and thought that was the end of his life. Like he's going down. He's about to crash into the ship, and then he doesn't end up dying. But like he thought he was about to die, and so he had the experience of nirvana because he let go of everything, and then he has this experience. So I mean, like they can happen. It's not always dose dependent.
Okay, I could see it now. You're knocking out some 14er in Colorado, like Pikes Peak, or like you're on the edge of like Pacific Tarn, like midsummer, but you get up to the Tarn and like it's all frozen over and stuff still, and you're looking down like at all the cascading lakes underneath, and where like the main trail ends, and take like 2 puffs of marijuana. Next thing you know, just boom, you're like floating next to the moon or something, looking down, or whatever the experience is like. Like I said, I'm ignorant to the whole thing. I got no clue what's going on as far as the visuals and what all's being seen. Like when you were talking about like the 10,000 year experience, in my head, I'm almost picturing like Harry Potter, like an all white room, and Voldemort's just like in the fetal position going through it. So,
Oh, I'd compare it to the Matrix white room, the construct, like being there, but you're alone. Morpheus isn't there. It's just you, and you're there for until you clean your act up. And for me, it took that long.
Is there anything in these trips where like maybe it doesn't seem like it at the time, or maybe it does? That seems like that would equally eye-opening but frightening experience where you're like, I don't want to ever go back to that, and you're reluctant to ever take a hallucinogen again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
because it's not 10,000 years, but in your head you're like, it really felt like it was that long. I don't know if I want to do that again.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, I mean, since 2017, I have not wanted to have that experience again until recently. So it's lasted about 5 or 6 years where I was like, nope, I don't want that again. Like, I don't want to get stuck there again. It scared me. I mean, here's another thing. 2013, that's when the first one happened for me, right? So I was in the middle of like producing this pilot, and I'd put everything into this pilot, like $50,000 of my own money, the most money I'd ever had. And it was all going towards this thing. And then I wake up on the other side of it and I have this pilot. It's produced. It's awesome, but I don't care. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine working your entire life? You know, since third grade, I was acting like averaging 2 productions, theatrical productions a year from third grade all the way through college, move out to LA directly after that. Like, you know, my entire life was geared towards this one thing. And then to wake up on the other side of that experience and be like, I'm just not in anymore. Like,
you finally get to the finish line and like the self-evaluation of like, why did I do this to begin with?
yes, exactly. And it was like, sure, I could pitch this, you know, like the agent wants to pitch this pilot and try to sell it and, you know, like get a TV deal. And I'm like, I don't really care anymore. I don't want to do it. Like, you know, it took years to assimilate that, like, I was over it. And it was brutal, man. But like, I mean, at the same time, it's like, I honestly 100% didn't want that life. And so I don't have that life, you know, like I got what I wanted, which is a meaningful life. And if I had, you know, gotten famous, I guess, through like the pilot and shit like that, like then I'd be a completely different person. Like, and I'd probably be a tyrant. I'd probably be dead. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like there was a bunch of self-hatred, and until I could look in the metaphorical mirror for an hour or two, I just wasn't going to be doing anything good with my life. So yeah.
Since that very first experience, reading the book and stuff, it's very well written. Could definitely tell, speaking from experience and research, especially with a lot of the stories shared throughout and stuff. Did you go back to school at all for any of these topics, or is this all kind of like self-taught, self-research, and through personal experiences?
Yeah, man, I'm like almost 100% self-taught. You know, I mean, obviously went to Florida State and did study psychology there, but ever since then, like, I mean, I'll tell you this, from age 22 to age 29, I watched at least one TED Talk every morning with breakfast. Like that was like my ritual. You know, it was just getting my head in the right space, getting me in a happy mood, like noticing that there are other really good people out there contributing to the field of time in a meaningful way, and I want to be like them. That was my like MO, right? And you know, well, by the time I was 29, it was like my brain had completely transformed because there was so many like talks that had just opened up these doors in my mind. Like I was like, oh, I'm now interested in this and philosophy and science, and like, you know, so it was just very like spreading out like a spider in a sense. And then it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do with this? And then it was like, you know, at 29, that's when I wrote a TEDx talk that I never got to perform. And then that TEDx talk got expanded into the book.
Okay. So what are like your future plans? Cause obviously writing a book is a lot, you know, you gotta take all that time to draft it, edit, and actually like go through with it, get it made, blah, blah, blah. So what are like your future plans for this? Is it going to expand to like podcasting like this, more books, websites,
A new pilot, but you spin it. It's like the new Archie, but for psychedelics. The new, what was the phrase? Tune in and tune out, sit down and tune out, or whatever.
Oh yeah. Tune in, drop out, something like that.
Yeah. Sit down, tune in, drop out.
Yeah. Well, Ray, what's next on the docket for me is there is another book in the works, but there's going to be more videos being released. I want to do a documentary. You know, I think I think the book was the ultimate medium for this message. Like, I think it is the way, if you're trying to understand what consciousness is, this is the way to do it. But I think the essential ideas can be repackaged into a documentary. I mean, the book itself is written kind of like a documentary, because a documentary, gives you different textures of information, montages, interviews, sometimes animation, and they're delivering information to you the entire way. It's just they vary up the way they deliver the information. And so traditional nonfiction to me is kind of boring, because it's just, it's just always the same texture of information. And so this is creative nonfiction because of the way it does dip into story, like here and there, every other chapter or mid chapter and stuff like that. So that it is very much like a written documentary. And so I think a documentary is going to be in the next couple of years, because I mean, if somebody can explain that Nirvana experience properly, which is what is explained in the book, then it's going to change a lot of things, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it really will. It really will.
It sounds like in the book too, you didn't want to go too deep into what that experience is like, so other people can go into it kind of like a clear slate with no almost like possibility expectation letdown. It sounds like from your last experience in 2017, like that feeling of, oh, I don't know if I want to take that long trip again is starting to fade. Do you think you'll ever get a point in your life where you will hit not that it was scary or off-putting at all, but just like that was the one, like I'm good? Or do you think as you get older, you grow, your son grows, there will always, however often or not often it occurs, a draw back to that to get that self-reflection?
I'm a little bit worried, not worried, but I guess these experiences, when they happen to you, like they happened out of necessity. Like something needed to change when I was 25, something needed to change when I was 30. And so those were the two most intense experiences we're talking about here. So not that I don't need to change now, but like my life is a little more, what would you say, fixed? It's like I know what I'm going to do with my life now. I'm not like floundering in any sort of way. And when it comes to relationships, I'm locked in, and I have a son now. So it's like there needed to be a lot of cognitive evolution that happened in 2013 and 2017 for me to be who I am now. But like now that I am, I guess, aimed towards the light, I think like I'm almost worried that those experiences might not be coming back.
The necessity to have another revelation to that extent might not be present ever again.
Yeah, because like, I mean, with each time, like, and this is what I would call the dark side of psychedelics that no one likes to talk about or no one remembers. And like, like I think I'm in the minority here when I do talk about it, because a lot of people don't remember the moment when they had the choice to come back. Like I do remember that moment. I remember choosing to come back. I remember like making the sacrifice to come back. And so every time you do that, like it's like a monkey paw situation where you're giving something up, and it's your old life. You're giving up these old patterns of behavior. And if you come back into your life and try to pick those back up, you're going to pay for it big time, because now because your subconscious showed you like, all right, okay, like this is what it was like. It was like my subconscious, in 2013 was like, okay, you're lying, you're cheating, and you don't have a best friend, and you're just not treating people well. This is why you said you did it. And it showed me like pictures and pictures and pictures of all the horrible shit that happened to me. And it's like, okay, well, this is why you did it. All right, well, now I'm processing all those information, I'm processing all those memories and filing them away. So it's no longer going to be the 100 icons of pain sitting on the desktop of your experience, infecting every decision that you make. Now they're going to be gone. Now you have a clear desktop. You have a clear mind again. What are you going to do with it? Because if you start putting these icons back in the desktop of, oh, I lost my friend when I was 19, and oh, this girl cheated on me, then you're just going to play the same game, which is it's a horrible game to play. It's this victim game. And what does that get you? Like, victim is a very low, on an energetic level, it's like the lowest form of energy. But like, responsibility is like the antithesis of that. To take responsibility is a very it's like a higher energy thing, that's for sure. And so, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, it sounds like at those points in your life, you were at a low threat, high reward possibility going into things where there was a lot of baggage there, a lot of trauma, weren't really happy with yourself in that moment. So it was low threat if you came out a different person, but high reward if you came out a different person. And it sounds like you're in a very solid spot in your life that you're happy with, where you're currently at with the wife and the newborn son. Mm-hmm. So it's flipped, and it's now high risk, low reward, because you truly believe you're in a good spot right now. But what if you go into that, process those big moments in your life of a newborn son and getting married and everything, and you move on to the next thing, and that somehow fundamentally challenges your relationship with your wife or the way you view having a son?
Yeah, I would. That is also a part of it too. It's like, I guess there's a less of a willingness on my part to like get completely rewritten, like, I guess as a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old, it was like, you're still figuring things out. But like now, as in my mid 30s, it's like, I don't want to lose what we've got. And I don't, like, I'm pretty happy with who I am, but, definitely not perfect or anything like that. Dude, I think I punched something like a month ago, and I think it didn't break, but I still feel it. And I hope that's the last time.
I have a real bad habit of grinding my teeth, like clenching my jaw.
Oh, really?
My wife yells at me all the time because she works in the dental field, and
okay.
I'll grind. I don't hit things anymore. I don't throw things anymore. I was never been abusive towards people or anything like that. But
why?
I've had temper tantrums where, like, working on my bike or something, like I scuff my knuckles because the wrench slips or something, and in my head I'm like, you know what, the bike's got to go through the garage door now. And why I did that, I just hurt myself further by creating a bigger problem. But at the time I was like, bike, garage door, they need to become one. But now I just grind my teeth. Lies? When have you seen me?
You would throw Legos at me.
Okay, well, Ray was always a terrible child.
Oh my!
We had bunk beds growing up. I don't know what his issue was. He did not like going to bed at night. He would just lay on the bottom bunk, screaming and yelling. So I would take Legos up to the top bunk with me, and I'd chuck them over the edge underneath me. Be like, stop crying. Obviously, he's getting hit in the head with Legos, so he continued to cry. I was like 8. I didn't have any self-reflection there. I was just like, Lego head, sooner or later he'll stop.
Yeah, that was way before the time.
As an adult, I've never intentionally abused someone out of anger. Let me put it that way, I guess. If that makes you feel better, Ray.
Yes, thank you very much.
I like to also point out he was like a chipmunk growing up as a kid, and he would not swallow his food when we ate. And he would just shove more and more food into his cheeks. One day he sneezed while sitting across from me at the table. And he had like 2 full eggs crammed in there, and it just shot out like a Civil War musket and just blasted me in the face. I was so mad. So mad.
Well, maybe you should have sat next to me.
Well, maybe you deserved every Lego you got in the face.
Maybe I did.
Oh man, that's great.
With the next part of where you want to go with this dive into psychedelics, are you actively pursuing right now finding different production companies to do a documentary, or is that all still kind of the development stage where you're trying to hammer out what exactly you do want to do, if it is a documentary or another book or a TED Talk. A TED Talk would be pretty cool. I feel like there was a time and place there where if you did a TED Talk, you made it.
Right. Yeah, no, there was. Yeah, no, the I still have that TED Talk. That chapter 27 is basically the TED Talk, and I still want to perform that because basically I put everything into one chapter. You know, like that the grand revelation that one has in a transcendent experience, the one that actually rewrites you. Like I couldn't quite explain that here, but I could explain it inside of a TED Talk, and so that is definitely on the docket. In June here, there's a psychedelic science convention that's happening. And so my wife and I are going to be exhibiting our book as well as a multi-sensory pop-up escape room at the same time, you know, at the convention. So people will come by and, you know, get to like play our escape game. And also, you know, like if they want a book, then it's there. And then, yeah, I believe the documentary is probably going to be maybe 2024. And then right now I'm currently recording the audiobook for this. And that is about 3/4 done. So I'm happy with that.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Nice. Is the audiobook going to be on Audible?
Yeah, it's going to be everywhere, man. I'm looking forward to it. Cause I think it opens up so many, when you're reading, that's the only thing you can do. But when you're, you know, audiobooking or whatever, you can do that while you're washing the dishes or driving or whatever it is. So like so many more people will be open to receiving this knowledge and information. So I'm looking forward to that big time.
Yeah, I know a big crutch for me of not reading more books is I like reading, but I'm a slow reader. Like if I don't read slowly and think about what I'm reading, I'll get through a page and I'm just like, what did I just read? But
Right.
if that's put in an audible format, it's just so easy for me to be working or working out or doing chores around the house, whatever, and have headphones in and just have that background noise and process things without having to, what takes 4 hours, someone, you know, reading it to me takes me 10 hours to make sure I'm reading and actually grasping and retaining what I'm reading.
It's a different experience, 100%. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like, I don't know if this happened to you. Like, well, maybe this is what you're talking about. Like, you'll be reading and then you start thinking about something else, but you still keep reading. So it's like a part of your mind is thinking about, like, I don't know, what you had for dinner last night. Yet you're like reading this page and then you get to the end of the page. You're like, fuck, what did I just read? Like, you were somehow your eyes kept moving, but you were thinking about something else. Like, so where did that information go?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's almost like certain parts of your books I was reading, and especially like the story portions, I was like thinking to myself more. I was like running with the story in my head instead of focusing on the next line. So like at a certain point I was reading and I was like, when do we get back to Dr. Jill? When did that happen? And like I had to go back because I was reading about the individual who, oh my gosh, what happened to him? He could no longer process new memories or recalled old memories, but he had certain recalls on things like playing the piano and stuff.
Yeah, Clive Waring. That's such an interesting. There's 2 documentaries on him.
Yeah, so I was like going down the rabbit hole in my head, like thinking about all the possibilities and like what maybe could help him. And the next thing I know, I'm like, it's like Dr. Jill, and I was like, wait, what? This is not who I was just reading of. When do we make the switch? I gotta go back.
Now, do you have like any social media right now that like puts your information out there?
I haven't been posting too many videos lately, but there are 3 videos that are really good. And like, I'll just give you one: the universal reason why people get depressed. After the 15th time I got depressed, I made a video called The Universal Reason Why People Get Depressed. And it was just extracting out the central pattern between why I got depressed 15 times, you know, like 15 years in a row. Like, what was the central thing? And so basically the architecture of that video is like lay out 10 findings in neuroscience. And then once you know these 10 findings, you'll never believe the chemical imbalance narrative that big pharma pushed in everybody's heads since like the 60s.
Is that on like YouTube or something? So like the listeners could go maybe check that out.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yes, it is on YouTube. So we have a website, consciousnessinanutshell.com. That's the easiest way to connect with us. Yeah, and on that website, you'll find our links to YouTube and any social media. We're at Consciousness in a Nutshell at everything.
Awesome.
Are you pretty much diving into this at this point as far as career wise? Like, this is obviously something you're very passionate about. Is this what you're trying to make a living doing, or is this a passion side project?
100%. So like the last 5-6 years, like I literally spent in a room. It's a research rabbit hole. Like, yes, I didn't go to a university to get most of this knowledge, but like anybody with, I mean, Google Scholar is amazing. There's so many amazing neuroscience papers, published on there that you can get any kind of knowledge you want. Like, I mean, you can get such a great education from YouTube. You just don't get any accreditation, which sucks. But yeah, I mean, like, that's the thing. So I'm so excited now because I finally get to share this information. But for 5 years, like, I mean, I was locked away, just like, all right, we got to figure out how to make this accessible. Like, everybody said this is a really hard experience to explain, but if we could explain it, like, it's the key to everything. It's the key to understanding what consciousness is. Because if all conscious states exist on a spectrum, and this is at the other far end, then to what our normal experience is, then if we understand this experience, like the peak experience of what human beings are capable of experiencing, like, then that's gold. That's everything. And where the book ends up, man, like, I got to tell you, like, we redefine what the force of evolution means. Like, what is life? That is a question that is answered inside this book. Now, if you're trying to understand what consciousness is, what is life is a question that is embedded inside that what is consciousness question. And so, like towards the end of the book, like, you have to get, like, we have to redefine what life is. But like, there's just so many. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd be interested to see like where this goes in a few years, because there's some big revelations that were listed in here. I mean, and I'm so proud of a few sentences in here, because like a lot of it is, a recapitulation of like pop neuroscience and pop science and stuff like that. But then there's a few different, very novel ideas, like a novel theory of the origin of depression that's in there, a novel theory about what consciousness is, and a novel theory about what life is. Like, I'm proud of those 3 things.
Okay. If there's one main thing you want the people to take away from, be it your book, your own experiences with psychedelics, what do you think that would be for somebody who's either never tried psychedelics before, or, they dabbled in other kinds of drugs, to the sheltered people out there like me and Ray that don't know nothing about anything?
Right. I would just say that, you've probably heard this before, but you are not your thoughts. And I mean that. Like, we have this part of ourselves that thinks and produces thoughts and talks in our head and criticizes us and, judges and that sort of thing. And this is not who you are. You are something that gives rise to that. So, in the book, we talk about like physical machines and virtual machines. Like, have you guys know what virtual machines are?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So a virtual machine, for like anybody who's listening and doesn't know, is kind of like a physical machine, except you run it on a computer. So I'll have a MacBook, for example, but I can run a different program inside a virtual machine. So if I run a virtual machine on my MacBook, I can run Windows inside this virtual machine. And so this virtual machine that is running Windows now, I'm running this completely separate operating system. It's using the same resources as my MacBook, but this virtual machine is not sharing information with the physical machine of my MacBook. So they're not sharing information. That's a crucial point. Now, the analogy here is that your ego self, or your narrative self, is a virtual machine that your body has produced. But we mistake thinking that we are just this virtual machine, when in actuality, we are the physical machine that gave rise to the virtual machine. And when you have a flow state, or you do sensory deprivation tanks, or you take psychedelics, you disintegrate this thinking, this virtual machine, the narrative self, that disintegrates, and you're left with what you really are, and that is something to connect to.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I know it's been 2 hours. We took a break. It's been a little over 2 hours.
Yeah, I think this is our longest one now, eh?
Yeah. You've been very easy to talk to this whole time. Hopefully we were easy enough to talk to as well, and you didn't have to fight to get the points across or anything like that. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Just again, this was been Jay with Consciousness in a Nutshell. You can find them on consciousnessinanutshell.com. They got Instagram, YouTube. They got some uploads on Spotify, Facebook. Find his book on Amazon. Maybe documentary here in the near future. Maybe we can say after he blows up that we know somebody that made it big time.
Hey, we interviewed that guy first.
Yeah. Like, hey, we know that guy. But it's definitely, this conversation and reading your stuff has definitely like put it on my radar. It's definitely nothing I ever thought about doing before, but maybe in my later years when it becomes legal or at a federal level, or I'm just not in the position that I am in now, maybe it's something to try out and see what I take away from it. Or maybe 20 years from now, I'll be in a clinic ran and operated by you. Maybe you can guide me through this journey.
It may be, man.
All right. Thank you again. I appreciate you coming out. It's been the latest episode of Pondering Pennies with Dempsey and Ray. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.